Thank you so much. This is the last session of what has been a fantastic conference. I'm delighted to be able to host this final and closing panel. What a treat it's been to be here for these last couple of days. I've found so many sessions so valuable. The choir last night was a real treat for me. Wasn't it amazing? Yeah, it really was. That dancing was incredible. And I can say that because as an Australian, our dancing consists of this. That's our dancing. So it was incredible to see that last night, so much energy. One of the sessions I really particularly enjoyed last night, or yesterday, was the conversation with our rugby players. And the thing that really struck me as they spoke, two things. One was the profound influence of family on their values and who they were and who they are and how they could attribute who they are today to the grandparents and uncles and friends and mentors and mum and dad who raised them. And it just reminded me again how important this idea of values is. And the second thing that really struck me was how they defined their success. They didn't tell us all about their exploits on the field. They didn't tell us about all the awards they'd won, really. What they really lit up about was when they told us how they're using their platform to serve others and to serve those who are in need. And that's when they really lit up. And to me, I thought they have defined success as serving and giving. What a great definition, and what a great way to lead into this session. It reminded me of a quote that I heard by a US theologian. His name's Dallas Willard, and he said this: "The most important thing in your life is not what you do, it's who you become. That's what you take with you into eternity." I'll read it again. "The most important thing in your life is not what you do, it's who you become. That's what you take with you to eternity." In fact, I'd say it's the only thing you take with you into eternity. Character matters, doesn't it? Character is really everything. And character is the essence of our conversation today. And because philanthropy actually relies on families of character, doesn't it, who are willing to give. But the challenge is many of those families are under threat. You may not be aware of this, but there are trillions of dollars of wealth to be transferred from generation to generation in the next decade or two. Trillions of dollars, not hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars. And the question is, what will happen with that wealth? How will it be used? Will it be used for self-enrichment or enrichment of others? And what will happen to the people who possess that wealth? Will it be a blessing to them to steward that wealth, or will it destroy them as it does so many? Will they flourish or will they fail? The sad news is historically the latter happens. More families fail handling wealth than thrive. In fact, 90% of wealth in family hands does not survive beyond the third generation. Isn't that incredible? Doesn't survive beyond the third generation. You might ask the question, well, why is that the case? How's that even possible? And the heart of the problem is this: when wealth is passed on without the wisdom and the values to steward that wealth, it destroys not only the possessor of the wealth, maybe not overnight, but over time, and ultimately it actually erodes the wealth as well. And for us who are in need of philanthropic funds, increasing funds that will be available as they're transferred from generation to generation, if those funds are lost, that's one tragedy, but a greater tragedy is the loss of the families that possess those funds. And so it really does make us highly focus on this question of how do you instill values generation to generation? Because if we can strengthen families and help them flourish with wealth, they will actually be much better stewards of that wealth. And that's what we want to see. We want to see them flourish, and we want to see the wealth they possess used in positive ways. So we certainly need to shape the character and values of those who steward wealth, and also of society more generally, as we've talked so much about in this session. So we're going to explore how philanthropy and giving generally can be a vehicle to instill values in society, how it can be a vehicle to promote servant leadership, as we've also heard about. We're going to explore how giving and philanthropy can unite communities and can unite families around a purpose that is beyond themselves. We're going to help see how philanthropy can give people a reason for their wealth, a reason other than self-edification. We're going to see how philanthropy can actually strengthen families and break that cycle, that 3-generation cycle I mentioned. And finally, we're going to see how philanthropy can really connect humanity and bring people together around a cause of humanity, humanity flourishing. So here to help me talk about that subject, I have 4 wonderful panelists, all of whom are stewards of or are preparing to be stewards of family wealth. And we have a number of different generations represented. First, we have I'll start here with Daryl, actually. Daryl, actually the least next-gen looking member of our panel, to be honest, but you can be next-gen even at over 50, because you are a 6th-generation family member, and you are with the McClellan Foundation, and we'll hear a little bit about your work as we progress. But the heart of that work we'll hear about is this generosity movement you're behind. One thing I need to note, somebody said to me over the break, hey, this guy's got 9 kids, is his wife okay? And good question, but 4 of the kids are actually been adopted from China, and so and it's been a delight to hear your story behind that as well. Yeah. And then next to Daryl, we have English Saul, who's with the Saul Family Foundation, and wears many hats. The most unusual of which I saw in your profile was as a data strategist. And the most interesting thing you said yesterday in one of your questions, and I've never heard it said before, is that I read an interesting statistics book. Never heard anybody talk about a statistics book that way. But anyway, I'm delighted that you love statistics, and that's actually fueled your work in Impact Thread, which actually is designed to try and improve measures of impact. Sumitri Aswani is 4th generation. I should have mentioned Saul is also, English is also 2nd generation. Sumitri, 4th generation, the Telegram Group based in Singapore. Delighted to have you with us. Your work is, your family's business extends into Indonesia, but also Nigeria and other parts of Africa, and that's where your foundation does much of its work. And do you mind if I share what you shared with me earlier? I struggle to speak slowly, and you do too. And you said, my mantra before I get up on stage is to say, I'm a sloth. I'm a sloth. I'm a sloth. So I'm going to try and remember that as we go through today. And finally, Vimbai Masiwa, 2nd generation. Delighted also to have you with us. Vimbai is founder of a startup, Sterling Culture, bespoke lifestyle and concierge service. We'll hear a bit about that as well. So look, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to start with you, Daryl, if you don't mind. I've heard you say, or quote the words of Jesus actually in your generosity work, which is the quote, it's more blessed to give than to receive, which sounds so counterintuitive. Many of us here will know the experience of it, but why is that true? Why is it the case? And has it been the case? How's it been the case for you?
Well, I think one, I think it's based in truth, but I think many of us maybe from a faith-based standpoint might know that phrase, but what's the power behind it? And what's I think more important is what's contrasted against that. And there's a competing worldview that says bigger, better, faster, more. And so essentially, I think those are 2 kind of contrasting worldviews that we have to decide which one do we believe. And what you believe is how you'll act. None of us act on unbelief. We only act on belief. Now, a lot of that, sometimes our actions are defined by cultural belief, but I think it's very important, and the work that we do in the generosity movement helps people process and answer this question: what do I believe?
And you believe it is better to give than receive. How's that played out in your family's foundation, and why did you decide you wanted to help others discover that truth?
Yeah, well, it actually, I'd say, goes back all the way to my wife's great-great-grandfather, who wrote a covenant to God at age 20 in 1856, and then rewrote it again at age 50, and then renewed it again at age 70. So there's a strong heritage and legacy within the family that if according to your statistics, and when I married into this family, it really scared me once I started reading books on families of wealth and the difficulties of just of managing the wealth, because most people think, well, you just won the lottery. That's a great place to be, but it's also the quickest way to destroy relationships and trust and family. And really the big counterpart to that is actually generosity. It's giving it, because otherwise it begins to control you and define you.
And so the generosity movement you've sort of been working on in the last 10, 12 years has led to how many people around the world now sort of tasting this message of generosity?
Yeah, well, tens of thousands now. We're in over 50 countries and 20 different languages, and it's just fun to see. It's fun to see people, transformed and freed up to do good. And we're in 9 countries on the continent of Africa now, and it's a pleasure being here. And I've really enjoyed hearing a lot of your own stories, and I've got great hopes and very bullish on the continent of Africa.
Thank you. Dimitri, your family story, 4 generations, you were sharing earlier over lunch about your family were refugees effectively, started with nothing. How's that story, maybe tell a bit more of it, how's that affected or influenced your family's, your journey and your family's mission?
Yeah, am I mic on?
Not yet. Let's just wait, get the handheld, if you don't mind. Can we get the handheld going? Yeah, do you mind if we get the handheld? Thanks. Great. Let's hold. Not yet, no. Just wait. Thanks.
Thank you. I think, so our family in the 40s during the partition of India was really on the border of that conflict between what is now India and Pakistan, what was colonial India then. And because of the conflict, we really had nowhere to go. So the refugee story is an old story, it is a current story, and at that time, we were very, very fortunate that we happened to have some trade links with Indonesia. So my family basically left everything and took a ship to Indonesia and landed there, where we were given an opportunity to start a small business from somebody who helped us with a space that was pretty much maybe where I'm sitting and where English is sitting, and just about that. And so the business started from there. And that story, I think, of hardship and having to start from nothing, seeded that entrepreneurial mindset of the family. And through that entrepreneurship, there was this seeking of new opportunities elsewhere, which is what brought us into Africa as well, Nigeria specifically in the 70s, and then to other emerging markets. But that mentality has been something that has continued to translate through the generations because of this understanding that, number one, we all have to start somewhere, and sometimes you have to give somebody a chance. So that's always been very pervasive in the narrative that has been translated down. So that comes from kindness. But the other thing is also this idea that you have to be resourceful and entrepreneurial and be able to take the opportunities that you have and create them into something where you can live off of or make something of yourself. But even till now, the chairperson of my foundation, for example, is a second-generation member. So he was 8 years old when that displacement happened. And even till now, he keeps that mentality of, we would never have been here if that gentleman hadn't extended a hand. And, so we always have that mentality of there has to be this paid forward. And we are very cognizant of the fact that we were fortunate in Indonesia and in Nigeria where somebody gave us a chance and therefore we were able to do something. And where we've come from now is an extension of that kindness. So it is only intuitive for us to want to extend that back into the community so that they too can prosper. Because it is completely senseless for us to feel like, okay, we're here now, we're great, okay, we finally come into wealth, and well, just kind of sit around and do nothing about it.
Yeah. Great. I mean, your family's unusual, and we'll maybe explore later how they've transferred that and kept that sense, because many lose that sense of where they began. And anyway, well, maybe in a later question we can come back to that. English, your story into sort of wanting to care for and serve others is a different story. You, like Daryl, also married into a family, but you have a very personal story around how you came to feel the way you do about others. Can you share that with us? I'm not sure. Let's use the, just in case.
Oh, that tastes.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I really do just want to take a minute, though, and say how much I appreciate throughout this forum the openness of the storytelling and the openness of everyone's being willing to share their personal experience. I go to a lot of conferences, and I gotta say that that's just not the norm. A lot of it's people sitting up here using acronyms and jargony words. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that, because these are the ties that bind us. It's our experiences that transcend borders. So I just want to say thank you. So for me, I like you said, I didn't grow up in wealth. I grew up not wealthy in a really small town in North Carolina, and I grew up being very sick and spent most of my childhood in and out of the medical system until I was 19, when I received a double lung transplant in order to survive. And I think that there's a shared humanity, and I think that there's a connectedness in what it's like to be a sick child, and that feeling of hopelessness. And I was lucky enough to receive this amazing second chance at life through a medical system and through amazing doctors and amazing caregivers. And I'm so grateful every day that I was lucky enough to fall in love with an amazing guy who's sitting right over there. And his family has just embraced that background and embraced that experience and allowed me to utilize the tool of philanthropy to help address this universal hopelessness that people can feel, and figure out how to scale care and to really ensure that everybody has the tools that they need to reach their full capabilities.
It's interesting, isn't it, that I think many feel like wealth is the ability to avoid struggle in life, and yet I'm sure we'll hear story after story of how struggle in life has forged the character that has been the key to success. And so it's interesting, that theme, and I've certainly heard in families like yours. Vimbai, your family's well known here and throughout Africa as activists, as advocates, as philanthropists. Been raised in that family, hanging out with 6 or 5 siblings. There's a lot of girls in that family. How's that all rubbed off on you, and some of the way in which you express your desire to see change in the world?
Thank you. So as my sister Tanya mentioned yesterday, many of our dinner conversations growing up were about how we would change people's lives. And one thing my father always spoke about, he always reminded us that his business is a profit-making business, but we must always remember that a lot of our customers come from very difficult backgrounds. And for me, that's always translated to the responsibility we have, or I have, in everything that I do, that there is still a country to build, and there is still people to help because somebody helped us along the way. Another thing that in our values is to always remember where we came from. And for me, my name is Vimbai Nashe, which means trust in the Lord. And I was born when my parents began their battle for the license. And we always, it's a constant reminder of where did we come from and where are we going, and how are we picking up people along the way. I recently founded my own business, and it took me a long time to get off the ground or to really speak to people about it, because for me, with the values that we have, which, it's always love God, love people, how was I going to connect my industry to changing the lives of young people and to developing, economies and countries in Africa? And I wasn't comfortable speaking about the business or launching it, not being able to have a direct link between the two. And that's as a result of the values my parents have instilled in me and the conversations we've always had as a family.
Amazing, thank you. Sumitra, I'm going to ask you, you've got a family foundation, and while philanthropy can help unify a family, it can often be very difficult to make decisions, can't it? It can actually be quite hard to arrive at agreement. That can be itself a source of conflict. How's that worked itself out in your family, and how's actually the process of agreement even strengthened you as a family?
Yeah, family is tricky. And we've spoken a lot about collaboration and working together, and even within units, whether it's businesses or whether it's in the foundation, or in this case, whether it's the organization of the family, it's tricky to align just what is it that we want, what are the values that we want to propagate. So those conversations happened over more than a year before we were able to get there, and we still don't really have alignment, whether it is between siblings or whether it's across generations. I think we know there is one unifying factor, which is that we want to be able to do something that is bigger than ourselves and that is good. And we understand this idea of stewardship of wealth doesn't belong to us. It just doesn't. Money is not something that you own. It's something that you happen to be the holder of at that point in time. So that's common. But navigating that, giving is very personal as well. You can't tell somebody how they feel about the cause that we want to give to. So alignment with the cause was difficult, alignment with the how, the where. There was a lot of that sort of conflict. And I don't really think that we were able to be very inclusive in the sense that there are still family members now who don't align by the foundation. But at some point, you have to be able to draw the line and say, okay, yes, charity begins in the home, and yes, we want to be able to serve the family before we serve others. But at some point, you have to be able to acknowledge that you can't please everybody all the time. And you have to say to yourself, you can participate. You are always welcome to come back and participate. But if you want to give in your personal capacity, then that is fine too, and we will support that. So navigating it is tricky, but at the end of the day, you have to put something bigger than the egos and the relationships in front of you, especially in something like philanthropy. This is something that is, philanthropy loosely, translated is basically the love of humanity. And selfishness has no place in that. So you have to be able to tell the person, it's difficult. I'm a fourth generation, and I'm a female. I'm an Indian family. So it's not easy to be able to go to your uncle and say, okay, well, you know what? We're going to put something else above your needs right now. Because what this foundation stands for is unity and good and something, compassion and empathy and all of that. And then just sort of say, if you can't be constructive and participate, that's fine, do your thing. But please don't get in our way either. So I don't think that there's a good way, and every family is different. So I'm not saying that there's some way that there's a good fix for it, but with time, you just have to be able to learn to navigate that. And there's tons of character building just in that. But I promise you that you're not going to come out of the family, everyone being happy and dandy and being great, we have a foundation now, let's celebrate that. Yeah.
Minbar, you've had the opportunity to work with your sister on launching the Elevate Youth Conference, which is an amazing initiative that you both worked on together. How did that come about, and how was it working with your sister?
I think working with family is always challenging, as she's mentioned. We're very different. There are 5 girls and 1 boy. We're passionate about different things, and as females, sometimes that passion is translated emotionally. My brother has to sit through it. But IU Innovate Elevate is something that Tanya and the team at the High Life Foundation came up with, and she invited me to be part of it. And for me, it was really about, I've come from a privileged background. I have a lot of knowledge, and my mom had been speaking a lot of the migration crisis and how many people are dying in the Mediterranean trying to cross for a better future. And one of the things that I really wanted people to understand through Innovate Elevate was there are opportunities in Zimbabwe, there are opportunities in Africa, because success comes from solving the problems that we see on the ground. There's obviously problems, but we can all be successful if we look in our community and see how we can make a change in our community. That was one of the key driving forces behind why I chose to be part of IUIC with my sister. And we learned a lot about each other working together. We think very differently, we work very differently, but one thing that's important is to always remember the end goal of what we're doing. It's not about ourselves. We always have to remove ourselves from the equation, because if our emotions and our feelings are in the middle of it, you forget the purpose of what you're doing.
It's a great reminder, isn't it? The collaboration that we've talked about in philanthropy generally, it actually happens in a family first. And so you're modeling in the family what we hope to model beyond as well. English, your family has set up its foundation in a way to be very, very inclusive so that all family members might grow through that. Can you just briefly give us an insight into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our foundation is set up, we have 12 members on our family foundation board, and it includes spouses, and it includes non-family board members. And I think that a message that has been sort of ingrained in our board and in us as Saul family members and as board members from the founders, my in-laws, is that collaboration is a muscle, just like a bicep, and you have to exercise it and you have to practice it. And in order to do that, you have to be exposed to environments where you practice it and where you exercise it. And I think the goal of their foundation really is to give us all a chance to figure out how we can exercise that and include as many perspectives as possible, and really the spirit of trying to democratize philanthropy a little bit.
Wow. Daryl, your own family, obviously there's a foundation that you're part of, but within your own family, kids of 9, which is almost like a whole company really, isn't it? But how have you been intentional about shaping your kids with the stewardship ethos, with this generosity message? What are some of the practical things you've done?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, someone told me, you do so much work in the nonprofit area, why don't you just incorporate it as a not-for-profit? And it might help you with the cost of raising all your kids. And when I heard about the panel I was on, I was thinking, wow, that's, I seem like kind of the odd man out, but then I realized I've got 6 daughters, so I feel right at home here with I think here's what we, as I told you before, when, kind of as an outside perspective coming into, at the 5th generation and realizing the dangers of that really kind of put us on, my wife and I, to be very intentional, because we wanted this wealth to be a blessing and for them to flourish, not fail. And it's very easy for your children to become defined by the last name and by the dollar figure that is known to people. And that's not their identity. And so there are several things that we have done in terms of like thinking through as parents, what is success for us? And again, I think success for, that it seemed like in our culture, was about their children having the right degrees so they make the right money and have the right homes and take the right vacations. And my wife and I decided that's not going to be our measurement. That our measurement needs to incorporate more of the characteristics that we really wanted them to have. And if we feel like they wanted to be successful and to really be a gift to the community and to the world, then it was going to take a lot of work. And so I'd say 3 of the things that we did is, one of them, there's a famous author in the U.S. named Mark Twain, and he has a quote that says, "Don't let school get in the way of their education." And so a lot of times we think, well, let's get them in the right school, and if they're in the right school, then they'll end up in the right place. But what I actually learned is that you can outsource the academics to a school, but you should never outsource the education of your children. And and so in order to do that with the work that we do with our family as global, as I decided, my 2 oldest were daughters, and at 7 and 8, I just started taking them with me on trips, India, Africa, South America, Europe, China, and all these different places. Now, they didn't enjoy the meetings that as I was meeting with different business people and different NGO leaders and things like that, and every once in a while I'd get a kick under the table Because for me to get them on these first trips, they asked me, could we go hold babies? Meaning, so we had sponsored some different children and things like that. And what do little girls like to do? They like to hold babies. And I thought, I don't hold babies, but okay, if you want to do that. And so this started this whole pattern of me being in meetings and then wanting to go hold babies all over the world. So I really felt like in the scope of who they were going to be and the family that they had been born into, we have this global perspective and mindset, and so they needed to, they needed that. The second thing we did then is, as I'd say, is I led from a teaching standpoint, because at that point I was doing that, but I would say that in order for this to be successful too, at some point the teacher becomes the student. And how that happened with us is, after 6 or 7 years of holding babies, my daughters looked at me one day, flying back from Asia, and they said, "Dad, we think that we should adopt one of these kids." And that kind of blew me away a little bit. At first, I tried to deflect it by, what orphanages you want to build, whatever, I'll give more money. But I wasn't sure about taking on, another child, particularly from a different culture. But this is when I realized I really became the student then. And if we want them to be successful, we will do that, because eventually, right, success is for them to be able to take the baton and run with it. And the third thing that we've done is incorporate what I call the power of a third-party voice. And what I mean by that is, when they're younger, they'll listen to you, but as they get a little older, who here has kids? Do you know what I'm talking about? They don't listen to you. So who do they listen to? You can have them begin to listen to, maybe listen to their peers, but my wife and I were very intentional to put different people around them, whether those were teachers or someone in the church or someone in the community or our family friends that we knew that would have the same philosophical alignment with us, but could speak to them, and they would really listen, and that was very powerful.
Great. We're going to move to questions in just a moment. There's some great themes there. The idea of remembering where you've come from is one of the really important ways of passing on values. If we lose our past, we lose our way. It's that kind of sense, isn't it? The idea of stewardship. I love what you said, Smitri, about we don't own this stuff. It's to be used for a purpose beyond ourselves. The idea of doing stuff together and learning and just being in the kitchen and cooking together. There's some relationship building that goes on there. And the idea of going out to the field and just kind of taking kids with you and letting them see themselves and have the transformational experience. All of these are character forming. And I love the intentionality with which you've each spoken and your families have invested in you in order to make sure that wealth doesn't destroy you, but actually it enriches you and actually allows you to enrich others through the wealth you possess. So thank you for sharing. We'll hear some questions, and we'll take, say, a handful of questions, and we'll get the panel to answer, and then we'll take another handful. There's Sarah over here, and the lady down here. I can't see with my glasses on. Let me take them off. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
One of the sisters, by the way, just in case you're wondering. So it could be a very tough question. Vinay is wondering what's coming next.
I promise it won't be too bad. Being a second generation myself, I sometimes do worry that I'm more efficient, or my interests make me more efficient at draining wealth than maintaining or creating wealth. And so I wanted to know if any of you have any insights into the importance of maintaining wealth rather than spending it down.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Good. We'll take that and come back to it. That's an excellent question. Thank you. From here. And there's one at the back there as well.
Thank you. My name is Lade Araba from Convergence Finance. Thank you so much for your candor and just the inspiring work that you're doing through your family foundations. I have two linked questions. And the first is, what are you doing to formalize the measurement of impact? So you're giving as families, you're supporting many causes, but are you deliberately looking at what impact your dollars are creating? And does that feed back into a loop where you're able to adjust the types of causes that you are supporting? Related to that, over the past day and a half, we've talked about where philanthropists can leverage their capital to attract commercial investment into difficult sectors across Africa and basically create a multiplier effect, have a lot larger impact. Are your families open to potentially engaging in riskier projects, riskier companies, supporting early startup costs for SMEs, I guess investing in research? Are these the types of things that you're also starting to consider as families when you're thinking about, longer lasting impact? Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll just take one more at the back there, and then we'll address those.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ho from Bokamoso Impact Investments. Thank you so much for this great panel. One of the one of the people here yesterday talked about how young people are not, or young people are self-centered, they're not as generous. But as someone who's young, who's been involved in the philanthropy space, we have a charity called Raise the Children, and we support orphans from deep remote rural areas in South Africa. We have about 46 orphans that we've supported. But one of the things that we drive towards is helping even the recipients of these scholarships and opportunities to realize that they have to be generous, and they have to think differently about investing in their communities as well. So what is it that young people can do to drive that spirit of generosity, whether it's at their workplace, and even as an entrepreneur myself, in my businesses, my drive is how do I actually have impact and drive the spirit of generosity with people that I work with.
Great, thank you. Some good questions there. Daryl, I'm going to ask you to maybe address the first question, which is around about the kind of next-gen formation, perhaps talking about the program you're launching around that idea of next-gen formation.
Yeah, so one of the things that just in as you've heard a little bit, just the angst and fear my wife have had just in raising our own children. One of the things that in the work that I've been doing with other families all over the world was, is this whole thing is how do we instill this character, the softer side of what we want to see this next generation become. And if we're hoping for the type of things that we've been talking about the last 2 days, then it's going to take that type of work. But that's very intentional work. It's not just something that that's just caught. It does need to. You do need to have role models and things like that. But there needs to be some study and time spent on it as well. And so one of the things that we've developed that we're developing right now and we'll launch in January is a next generation program that's really focused on these type of components. And we really hope that would be helpful, including the fact that I think, Sarah, your question was about just even the wealth component of it, of not just something that's just spending, that you're also maintaining. And one of the things that I realized too is that our family was making a lot of investments in different entrepreneurs. We do private equity, venture capital, social impact investing and things like that. But then when some of either, I've got a daughter and I've got a son who are more entrepreneur, and I just realized, that why was I looking at them differently? Why don't I invest in them? Because if they want to also be wealth creators, then I think we need to encourage that in our own families.
Do you want to answer any of the other questions that were asked, particularly about impact perhaps, and also whether you're open for more risky type ventures, which philanthropy lends itself to? Any three of you, please speak to any of those.
I'm going to touch a little bit on each of the questions very shortly, but to answer your question specifically, one of the things we did 2 years ago was we restructured, and this foundation came out of that entire restructuring process. So 25% of all of the business earnings effectively is now this foundation. Now, I left my professional career to come and do this, and one of the criteria for me leaving and joining this was I asked for a lot more say in the foundation as an executive director from my granduncle. And we wanted to be a bit more audacious and a little bit more risky. is taking time. It's only been a year and a half. We're a very young foundation, but there is more openness through some case studies. So we're doing some work in like collective impact, working with other organizations to like create innovative ways to finance projects. We are doing a bit of impact measurement, but it's something that my team is learning because some of my team came from what was previously our philanthropy now into new philanthropy. So there's this process of like upskilling the whole team and then moving in that direction. So it's kind of a work in progress. On the topic of maintenance of wealth, this is a pet peeve of mine. I think it's good that we want to be stewards of wealth for a long time and we want to provide for our children for years and years and years. But there's going to be no world for our children if we don't draw down now and start putting money on the ground now. And this is another contention point within my family because it's like our ratio of what we spend to what is in our endowment is heavily skewed towards our endowment. And that investment is sitting pretty, drawing, yes, nice return on investment, but like it's not solving any problems. So it is important that you are able to galvanize that youth and that energy and say like, okay, I have a great project, let's go take a bit of risk, do this project. Obviously, you're going to need the support of your board who may not always agree with you, but there has to be a little bit more of that shift towards saying we have to solve problems now. We can't just sit around and have our endowments last for 9 generations. My 9th generation is going to be living in a desert with like no water if we don't start drawing down on that now. And to the point about young people and kind of leveraging that energy and that enthusiasm and that audacity, I agree that there's a spectrum of types of youth, that we shouldn't overgeneralize about what young people are. There are people who are very entitled and very self-centered, but so there are adults who are like that as well. It's got nothing to do with being young. So the thing about youth is that we have this hunger, we have this fervor, we want to do a lot of things, right? But the thing is that we have to also earn that, and there has to be that trust building with the generations above us, whether it's family or not. There is experience and there's wisdom and there's something that we can take from older generations that can teach us. So we have to be open to learn from them as well. And that comes back to the point about collaboration, which is like within generations, leverage the strengths and think about how we can use our strengths as young people with that audacity and that energy and those ideas and that ability to use technology and innovative finance, and then draw on the wisdom and the experience of the generations that came before us and say, how can we use that, like their entrepreneurial mindset, for example, and how they were able to do something with nothing, and what we have, and then go forward and solve those problems. So that's everything, right?
Yeah, really helpful, thank you.
I want to echo Sumatra's points here, and I think that to the point of measurement and risk in a family foundation. First of all, families are tricky. Measurement is tricky. Measurement in families is really tricky. I think that, yes, the answer is yes. I see more and more in our foundation and other foundations, especially as the next gen is coming onto the boards and inheriting and becoming stewards of wealth. Risk is in common vernacular. It's there, and people want to take risk. And I think it's important to think through the role of a philanthropist and of a family foundation. I think, there's risk takers and then there's de-riskers. And it's really, really great to instill some of the, risk-taking DNA into the next generation now. And providing the space to fail in taking that risk is so important. I think to the area of measurement too, historically what I've seen anecdotally is that family foundations and philanthropists often sort of take on the metrics within the organizations that they fund as their metrics of success. And I think we have to be a little bit more innovative here. I think that we need to think about what problems we're truly trying to solve as an entity, as a foundation, as an evolving, growing organism. And I think truly, if we're really honest with ourselves, taking risk and finding innovative solutions, innovative solutions are innovative, right? They're new. So inherently, some of the metrics and measuring that success are going to be innovative as well. And we have to take responsibility to not only find those innovative solutions, but find those innovative ways to know we're doing what we say we're doing.
Goodbye.
So going back to your question on what can young people do to drive the spirit of generosity. Yesterday, my sister and I were discussing a study done by Legatum, which said that 62% of my generation are only willing to work with companies that have some kind of positive social impact, which means that young people want to do something. What we have to do is to create the right framework and roadmap for them to be able to do that efficiently and effectively. And I think one of the things that I think is worth exploring is integrating service and measuring the impact of that service into our education systems. I was educated in an American university, and one of the organizations I was part of required me to do about 40 hours of service every 2 months. And we had to write down the impact of what we did. So it wasn't enough to go and volunteer and do admin. You had to go into the community around the university and do something that changed somebody's way of life. And I think integrating those kinds of programs into schools and universities here would be a great way for us to start channeling the energy that young people have.
We're out of time. I'm going to ask the panel just for a final comment. Just two observations. Thank you so much for sharing, by the way. It's been really helpful. For those who are seeking funds from family foundations like these, my observation is for many of you, you actually don't realise what's going on in the family. And I hope by having a bit of a glimpse, you'll see there's a bigger story at play here. And while there is an impact story, we want to see impact for the funds invested, there's a double impact. The other impact for the family is that it needs to deliver meaning to the family. It needs to help enrich the family, help them express their values, help them grow as a family together. And if you can perhaps think about positioning some of your work and ways that will help the family grow, I think you'll be much richer for it. The family will be richer for it. The beneficiaries of the work will be richer for it as well. It's this double impact, meaning and impact on the ground that we're looking for. I think that's something good for you to think about in this values transmission piece we've been talking about. Any final thoughts from any of the panel? I don't feel like you need to, but if you wish to, you can certainly make a final brief comment.
Well, I would like to speak to the risk piece. I feel like the foundation or trust assets in the whole capital stack that we look at around the world, it should take on the most risk. So that's just my view on it. Is I think that's the opportunity we have that I think is not necessarily traditional philanthropy, but I would say we should take on the most risk, help innovate, help bring those ideas to the point of where the market says they're for profit, not for profit, and then the other types of funding will follow.
Right. Any other thoughts, just as we close?
Speaking on the youth thing, I think I go back to the Mandela quote: "Is what we expect is often the outcome." And so, if we want to have generous children, we want to have generous youth, then we need to have an expectation that they can do that.
Great.
I think that's an excellent point, Daryl, and I just want to echo that. And I think that one thing I'm seeing is, in this talking about generosity, I think it's important that we, integrate generosity of our resources, generosity of our time, generosity of our skills. But the most important thing that I've learned from my family foundation and the people around me is the most important thing you can give is generosity of spirit. And the more that we can integrate that and the more that we can make that part of our DNA for ourselves and our children, I think the better off the world is going to be.
Vimbai, I'll go to you.
I think for me, one thing that I've learned is to be effective, we need to spend time on the ground. We need to understand what is going on in the communities we want to impact, what is going on with the issues that we're interested in. Because being on the ground, there's nothing that changes your mindset like being on the ground does. And working in silos benefits no one.
Right. Samiti.
I guess just on the risk point, like one of the questions that I generally ask is, we didn't get to the way we are in the business without taking risks. And we have to do the same with our philanthropy. It doesn't go down well, but I do say it. I think the final thought, the most important lesson that you can learn from working within a family foundation is how to communicate effectively. And communicate is not just, even though I consider myself pretty vocal, it's not just communicating outward. It's learning to listen. And the thing about listening is that if you can't even learn to listen within your family to what they're saying to you or what they're not saying to you, how can you even pretend to start to listen to the people you want to serve at the end of the day with the foundation? So that skill of just stopping and understanding what it is that the family is trying to say, what it is that we're trying to channel out, is probably the most critical lesson that I've learned working with my family.
Well, thank you. Well said. We appreciate all of your insights, and no doubt you're available for questions afterwards if anybody would like to follow up the conversation. Would you please thank the panel for me?
Thank you.